and Social Affairs. Welcome, Lucia, Mark.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos. Muitas graças, secretário Abelardo de la Roça, pela sua presença e por apoiar a realização deste importante evento. Estamos muito contentes de estar em Madrid, essa hermosa cidade, para celebrar os logros e debater o impacto do Programa de Avaliação Internacional de Competências de Adultos. Isso é tudo que meu espanhol me permite dizer. So I will change to English. Well, good afternoon to all. I would like to express my warm welcome to all speakers, participants, and colleagues joining us here at Madrid, at this beautiful auditorium, and online. I'm truly pleased and honored to open the 7th International PIAAC Conference. This is a special moment. It's the first international conference after the release of the results of Cycle 2, which provided very rich data to analyze, to explore, and to learn more about how adults acquire skills, how they maintain their skills, and maybe lose their skills if they don't use it throughout their lives. Cycle 2 provides fresh insights into adult skills worldwide, and this conference will be really interesting to see researchers and policymakers really exploring how this data is going to inform their policymaking in their research offers. We have, at the next 2 days, a unique chance to share knowledge, exchange ideas, and strengthen collaboration among us and among all researchers and policymakers that really work to improve the conditions and the skills of adults worldwide. Let me start by reminding you what is PIAAC. PIAAC is the survey of adult skills, which is part of the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. It measures how well adults aged 16 from 65 can read, use numbers, and manage and solve everyday problems. These foundation skills help people to find and understand information, which is very important in our society today, manage daily tasks, and take part fully in work and in society. The survey of adult skills is conducted every 10 years. The first cycle took place between 2011 and 2017, and 39 countries and economies participated over 3 rounds of data collection. Cycle 2 of this PIAAC has undergone 1 round of data collection, and the results were released by the end of last year. But there'll be a 2nd round of data collection that is estimated to start in 2028. So what information PIAAC collects? PIAAC collects a broad range of data covering much more than just adults' foundation skills. Of course, it does collect data on essential skills like literacy, numeracy, adaptive problem solving, and social-emotional skills. But it also collects data on factors that influence skill development, such as personal characteristics like age, gender, migrant background. Also collect the data on education and training, and jobs, and how often skills adults acquire are used at work in daily life. Finally, PIAAC collects data on the social and economic outcomes of individuals, including employment, status, wages, health, life satisfaction, and civic engagement. The breadth of data makes PIAAC a unique source for research and policy. connecting skills to economic and social outcomes, and understanding which policy levers can be used to help people develop these skills. So which countries participate at PIAAC? Oh, sorry, I didn't change here. I'm sorry. Now you can read everything that I just said. I hope it was right. If you see any discrepancy, please raise your hands. Which country participates in PIAAC? Well, PIAAC is a truly global assessment. In the 2 cycles, more than 46 countries and economies have participated. In cycle 2, 31 countries completed data collections already from 2022 and 2023, and 7 more will collect data on 27 or 28, around this time. Participants include OECD members and non-members from all continents. This diversity really allows for rich cross-country comparisons on skills, education, and labor markets. So how is PIAAC data used on policymaking? Because I think it's important that for OECD, our mission is to provide data and insights for policymakers to improve, to design better policies for better lives. So it's important for us to know if countries are using this data really to design public policies. And a recent survey done by the PIAAC team found that 21 direct policies were recently launched by different governments drawing on PIAAC's data. These policies use the empirical findings of PIAAC to identify specific gaps in a specific population. Because PIAAC data is from 16 to 65, you can really identify specific needs of different cohorts and design policies and programs really to target this special population. It was also used to justify funding. We are at a stage in history where we have to justify just to maintain or to increase any investment in education, which is sadly because we, of course, believe that education has a value for itself, but with fiscal constraints, governments are even more needing data to justify the investments they do in education and reskilling and upskilling, and for more monitoring and evaluation. Looking closer on the themes, the policy areas that these policies address, we can see that there are at least 6 different areas that policies that have been recently developed based on PIAAC data target. First one is strengthen basic skills. And that we can have one example, the example of the program to promote basic skills of adults in Switzerland. Strengthen digital skills, that is very important because with the rapid changes in technology, people need really to acquire digital skills or update their skills, as, for example, artificial intelligence advances. There are policies also on increased adult learning participation, and the data show a very interesting, sad data that the workers that need the most reskilling and upskilling and access to learning opportunities are the ones with the lower levels of participation. So we need programs really and policies to stimulate and incentivize these workers to participate in adult learning. And the Flemish region of Belgium has a very interesting program on an action plan for lifelong learning. To build international education, PIAAC data informs the development of the framework for monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals by UNESCO. Also, PIAAC data is used to reform formal education, particularly vocational education and training. So what is really useful, what kind of skills need to be developed by vocational programs in order to develop the skills that are needed for the labor market. And New Zealand is a good example they have a recent reform of their vocational education and training, and used a lot of PIAAC data to inform the design of this policy. And to tackle education inequalities. So PIAAC data has also impact in more broader policies like the Czech Republic Education Policy Strategy 2030 Plus, which is an overall view of reforming education and making education really ready to prepare individuals for the challenges and the needs that they will have in their lives. So that basically is the areas that we see that PIAAC data is informing policies, and you can really learn more about it, on the report that was produced by PIAAC team that has many more examples of how PIAAC data really was used to inform public policies. And I was a policymaker myself some years ago, so I always find it useful to learn about these other experiences, not to make the same mistakes again, and really try to apply what worked in different contexts. Of course, always adapting to the reality of each country, but it's really good to see how other countries are using PIAAC data really to inform the design of their policies. So I encourage you to download the report here, and if you really like it, send it some good words to the PIAAC team that put a lot of effort at LS together to put this publication together. And that is for policymaking, but we have some data also on the impact of PIAAC data on research. And we are glad that, of course, we don't have data from the last cycle that was published last year, but we have data on how PIAAC data was used by researchers to explore the skills and understand the links between education, skill development, and the labor market. When we look the focus of this research, of course, most of them are on human capital, cognitive skills, education and labor market, that Mark is going to talk more about it, employment, participation, inequality, migration, and basic skills, cognitive skills and adult education and lifelong learning. But there are some other topics that are covered by this research, like non-cognitive skills, innovations in methodology to measure skills, and mismatches between skills and the labor market. And some other topics that are important also, like aging and health literacy, problem solving and automation, returns on skills. So how much do you get as individual a return when you develop new skills throughout your life, informal learning, and trust. So now I will give the floor to Mark Pearson, the Deputy Director of the Employment, Labor and Social Affairs, my colleague, that will focus more on the impact of PIAAC data on labor markets.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, State Secretary, for hosting us. It really is very much appreciated. Thank you all for attending, either here in person or online. I hope you're going to enjoy the next day or so of discussions. And thank you, Lucia, for being up here on the stage with me. And it did occur to me before we started, we haven't really explained why there's two of us up here doing the keynote.
Well,
and, you know, many of you know, but maybe we should do a little bit of explanation because PIAAC is a two-headed beast. It has the education and skills, the education policy committee, the education community, represented, of course, physically by you, Lucia, and I'm from the other head, the Employment, Labour, Social Affairs parts of the OECD Secretariat, the Employment, Labour, Social Affairs Committee and the employment and labour markets community more generally. I was Googling furiously down there when I realised we hadn't been explaining why there were two of us up here about which beast we were most like from mythology. And they're all horrible. They're all Hydra. It's a beast that I think Hercules killed, isn't it? Cerberus, which was guarding the underworld, had multiple heads. Chimera. Janus, two-faced god from Rome. Oh, they're all useless. So I think that's a challenge before the end of this conference. If somebody gets bored, could they please find a suitable image to explain how, in fact, we're not a beast. We get on really well, and this is an absolutely fantastic outcome of so much collaboration between the different parts of the OECD, the different committees, but also the different policy communities more generally. My task, as you've already heard, is really to give some idea of how we use the PIAAC data in our work at the OECD, which is impossible, of course, to do properly. So it's all you're going to get is a greatest hits. You're going to get a few slides of some of the most striking, I suppose, results that we've been getting from the work that we do at the OECD. But let's hope we find many more things than I will mention today that we should be talking about. So getting into it, it is used by the Education Policy Committee for Education at a Glance, the Skills Outlook. It's used by the labour area, things like the Employment Outlook, where we use it all the time. Virtually everything we do is using PIAAC data. But it is worth saying that actually it's used more generally across the OECD policy community. I mentioned there the Economic Policy Committee, which serves ministries of finance, ministries of economic affairs. It's very rare that you'll find one of those economic surveys that they do each year for countries that doesn't include PIAAC data. It's used by our Local Employment and Economic Development Committee. It's used by the Committee on Fiscal Affairs, which looks at taxation a lot. They've been using it very extensively. And the Trade Committee even has been using it. I could go through many others, but it isn't just the committees that own the data, the policy communities that own the data. It's been used to shed light on all sorts of different economic policies that we are faced with, the challenges that we're faced with today. But I did say I would give some greatest hits, so let me move straight on to some of the most striking results that we've got from our analysis of the two waves, two cycles of PIAAC. The first one, I'm going to do these as a series of 5 questions. The first one was, do adults have the skills they need to thrive in a changing world? Look, I mean, with the information we've got in PIAAC on literacy, numeracy, adaptive problem-solving skills, we can look at whether adults and workers are equipped for the changes in the labour market or the different mega trends that are going to completely change how we work in the future. And the sad story is that we do look as if we have a sizable challenge in front of us. First of all, just looking at the levels, while many adults do have high levels of skills, 18% on average do not have the most basic levels of proficiency in literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving skills. In fact, it gets worse than that because this chart looks at changes over the past decade. The bars show the raw numbers, the changes in the number of people who have poor skills, or rather the level of skills that workers have. But we're also putting some green diamonds there, which make an adjustment for the changes in demographic structure that have taken place over time. Look, and the general story is that there's only 2 countries, can we actually say, in this case, literacy, look in particular at literacy, can we actually say that the adult population has higher literacy skills in the second wave of PISA compared to the first wave of PISA. Denmark and Finland. Wow, that would have been embarrassing if I'd confused Sweden. Yeah. Wow, I would never have got out of the room alive. No, anyway, it's Denmark and Finland have improved clearly. If you just look at the numbers that have adjusted for demographic structure, you can add Sweden and Norway too. But if you look at the number of countries where we can say that the average skill level has declined, it's a larger number. And that's really quite disturbing, I think. If we looked at numeracy, the picture's a little bit more positive. There's more countries that we can say that there's been an improvement. But I suppose despite the greater attention that we've been given to skills over the period between the first and the second wave of PIAAC, it is striking that we've not managed to have more countries where we can definitely say there's been an improvement in skills levels. A second of my greatest hits slides is to help, PIAAC helps us understand which jobs are most at risk of automation. And of course, PIAAC helps in this because it has information on the share of adults that work in routine or non-routine jobs in each country and how intensive that usage is. What this chart shows is that on average, less than half of workers, 46% to be precise, worked in non-routine or low-routine occupations. Now, generally, we would expect people who are working in non-routine or low-routine occupations to be less at risk of automation. Of course, that may change over time. But still, we're finding 46% in those sorts of occupations. There's a bit of country difference in detail there. You know, you can see UK is has most workers who would be exposed, Canada the least. But still, I think the main message there is that high proportion on average who are potentially in more routine intensive occupations. And generally those are the occupations which also have lower skill levels, and we can demonstrate that, of course, by using the PIAAC data. So I think what we can conclude from this is lower skill level workers are more at risk of automation. That's no surprise to anybody, but we can look at that in much more detail using PIAAC to pick apart which occupations they're in, which industries they are in. One of the biggest uses, I suppose, of PIAAC data at the OECD so far has been in this sort of area. Third of the greatest hits slides is whether workers have the skills they need to work in the increasingly technology-rich environments that they are faced with. So PIAAC lets us look at problem-solving skills and digital skills in their work. And the vast majority of adults do, of course, have to solve unforeseen tasks at work, and they do need problem-solving skills. And we do show using PIAAC that adults who score the highest levels of proficiency in problem-solving in technology-rich environments are more likely to be in the labour force, more likely to be working, and they're more likely to have higher wages. However, this chart shows that around 30% of adults do not have adequate levels of proficiency in adaptive problem solving. They're the people who are to the left of the zero line in this chart. They have a proficiency level of 1 or below. We can show the same sort of thing if we look at ICT skills. There's many adults still with no experience really with computers at all. And the proportion of adults who use ICT frequently at or outside of work varies enormously across countries. And we can see from this chart in terms of adaptive problem solving, Japan and the Nordics and the Netherlands do best. They only have fewer than 20% of the population at a level of 1 or below. Much bigger problems in Chile, Italy, Poland, Lithuania. where there's many adults with low levels of proficiency in adaptive problem solving. Oops, shouldn't have done that. There we go. Fourth slide that I'm going to show is that we've used PIAAC to investigate how workers use their skills at work. Because just because you have a more proficient workforce doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be using those skills in the workplace. What we've got in this chart is to look at whether a 1 standard deviation increase in skills use at work, what that is associated with the hourly wages that people have. And what you can see is that it has quite a significant effect. A 1 standard deviation increase in skills use in influencing, reading, ICT, numeracy, you're talking about 5% or more higher hourly wages. The implication of that is what happens if you don't use those skills. It means lost productivity, lower worker well-being, diminished returns on investment in education. So bridging that gap between skills proficiency and skills use to ensure that talent is used fully and productivity gains are broadly shared, again, is one of the big areas that we use PIAAC for in the OECD's own work. Final chart, it's not really a chart this time, it's more indicating an area of work which I think is interesting, is really looking, we focus a lot at younger people, especially when we talk about skills. But in many respects, the biggest challenge we've got is looking at the employability of older workers at the moment. And we can understand the evolution of skills and training patterns for older people using PIAAC. And what we're really developing there is what can be done to help mid-career and older workers stay in the labour market. Instead of just focusing all our efforts in making sure people get into the right careers at the start of their working lives, what can we do to make sure they end up in good careers so that they continue to work into their 60s as we need them to, given what's happening with demographic aging. PIAAC shows that information processing skills do decline faster for older adults. It does show that older workers are slower to adapt new technologies than younger workers. That makes it sound as if older workers are a problem. I'm increasingly sensitive to that particular message, I find, as the years go by. But that's not really what we're saying. There's lots of evidence of the value of having older people as well as young people in our workforces. Indeed, having that mix, we can demonstrate, actually results in higher productivity than if you just have younger workers or just have older workers, even with the same skills mix. That breadth of age is actually good for productivity. But the decline in some skills clearly is a barrier to work, something that we do need to address for older people. And it is therefore a problem that older individuals are less likely to participate in training than younger people. So what we've been doing there is to look to see if we can identify better potential policies to support older workers to stay productive for as long as possible. Things like that mid-career career guidance, that mid-career training support in order to promote a more productive older workforce. That's very much greatest hits. There's an awful lot more that we could be talking about. I'm very keen to learn more about how PIAAC data is being used or could be used to inform policy and practice. That is one of the main reasons for having this conference, and really therefore looking forward to the presentations and discussions we'll have over the next 2 days. But with that, enough from the two-headed beast. Let's get it into the rest of the sessions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Lucia. Thank you very much, Mark. We got scared at the beginning with the introduction.